So my name is Vince Tomich, and I'm an advisor here at Reddick. My primary role as an advisor is to learn as much as I can about each individual investor and to help guide you through the process to achieve your investment goals. I was born and raised here in Southern California, and I have been in the real estate industry for over 7 years now. I found Reddick by attending a webinar just like this. I actually I had a few investment properties at the time and became very interested in growing my portfolio. And when I discovered this company, when I discovered a company that helps facilitate this process, I was all in. I do like to practice what I preach, as I have purchased properties through Reddick, and I have them managed by our company as well. So something that I find easy to when I'm advising or talking to folks about their situation, it's easy to relate to things that I've personally done, or people that I've obviously that have helped, to use those stories and examples as ways to help benefit some of the folks, the new folks that I'm working with. So prior to my role as an advisor, I was a mortgage lender for a number of years, and that's where I learned the value of leveraging money. I realized that investing, especially in my market of Southern California, was very difficult. But when I was introduced to the idea of investing out of state, coupled with understanding financing, that's what made the goal of investing very possible. So it looks like I made some calls out today, and I spoke to some of you and left a handful of voicemails as well. But I see that there are some folks that are probably familiar with Reddick, but I do see that there was a lot of names who maybe not be as familiar. So this is always a good time for me to explain, who Reddick is and what we do as a company. So we are a full service real estate firm, and we basically have 4 primary services. We have real estate brokerage, property management, private lending, and our investment fund. So for our real estate brokerage, we help people buy and sell property, whether that be a primary residence or investment property. For property management, 99% of the folks that do buy an investment property are going to need property management. So that entails, everything from A to Z. So we help our folks market the property. We, screen tenants. We do rent collection, rent disbursement, any kind of maintenance issue we would handle. The end of the year 1099, tax forms we would be able to also issue you. So basically, everything that would be a typical responsibility of the owner, we would take that on. Our third service is private lending, which is a really unique part of our business. We actually have 2 sides to that business, or 2 clients. We have borrowers, and then we have lenders. So let me give you an example of some borrowers. Examples of borrowers would be folks that are looking to do a fix and flip on a property, or another good example of a borrower would be someone who is may have a self-directed retirement account, and they would like to acquire a piece of property in that. You need what's called a non-recourse loan, and private lending offers non-recourse. So that would be another good example of a borrower. On the flip side of that, we have our lenders. So the same way that you can invest in property, we also give our investors the ability to invest in mortgages. So these are first position mortgages, and the same way you can collect rent checks as a property owner, you can collect mortgage payments as a lender, right? So those are the 2 parts of our private lending, or more specifically, our direct lending. As of 2 years ago, we also launched our Reddick Mortgage Fund. So this kind of ties into our private lending side, where instead of being a direct lender, meaning one borrower for one lender, we have now launched a fund where we have pooled investments. We have multiple borrowers that have contributed to our fund. And then our fund manager is responsible for underwriting and funding loans that we see fit. So instead of taking on more responsibility on one borrower, you've spread the risk, you've joined the fund, and ultimately you've been able to be part of a constant stream of income via that fund, right? So, there's quarterly distributions, and, our fund is responsible for, funding these loans and dealing with payoffs and whatnot. So it's a little bit more of a hands-off experience into the lending world. So, any of these questions or anything that anyone would like to hear more about, I'm more than happy to explain that further. But this is just kind of a quick synopsis of what we do. And, ultimately my goal is to make the process of investing as seamless as possible by educating and introducing our key players that work with us to make the whole process happen. So, for our presentation today on how to buy investment property, these are some of the topics we're going to cover. So these are all important steps in the process, and if there are anything specific that someone would like to focus on in more depth, I will be doing follow-ups after this, follow-up calls after this presentation, most likely tomorrow, and we can go over these, on a one-on-one basis. But this is, what the extent of the presentation is going to look like. So we want to figure out how to set your investment criteria, how to conduct proper due diligence. We're going to go over a few formulas and calculations on current properties that are on our website. We're going to go over some financing options, property management, as well as locations that we operate in. So sorry about that. So next is where to begin. So it all starts with a conversation with an advisor like myself. This is where I'm able to learn a bit more about each of you and what you are trying to accomplish. So, our our consultation or our investment calls, you can kind of track the methodology here, right? We want to go over the who, what, when, where, and why. So, like, for example, why? Why? Let's figure out your goals. Why are you doing this? Why would you be potentially buying property? Is it for cash flow? Is it for appreciation? Is it for taxes, etc., right? So we want to figure out the reason. How do you plan on purchasing this property? I can't tell you how many times I get on the phone with clients, and we want to go over a kind of an elaborate plan, but ultimately how we plan on purchasing or the financing is such a critical part of this. So that is so important, right? And when we say how, is it going to be conventional financing, cash, private lending, and we'll go over a few of those options a little later. But when is also another good one. Is it something you want to execute now? End of the year? Are you guys waiting for anything particular to happen, in your life that may, be the triggering factor of when to get started? What types of property, is another important factor. Typically we focus in the 1 to 4 unit range. We will get into larger multifamily, but we don't operate in like the office or industrial space. This is typically residential to medium-sized multifamily, but single families, duplexes, 3 units, 4plexes, definitely something we're very, very familiar with and we do on a daily basis. Going over where, identifying markets. So, not all markets across the country may make sense. So, going over what markets can help you achieve your goals is something that I can also assist with. And then last but definitely not least is who. There are tons of, key players involved. Myself, I'm an advisor. There's lenders, our real estate agents, insurance. We are a big team here, and we're able to help facilitate to get you in touch with all of the appropriate people along the way. Even more complex, right? Those that are selling properties and doing 1031 exchanges and need accommodators or attorneys or whatever you may need, we definitely have those resources for you. So I wanted to first break down the milestone, which is the what, right? So all the factors you see here, price, property class, property type, condition, property details, these are all important to understand when figuring out what you're going to buy, although not everyone's what is going to be the same, right? So people qualify for different amounts, they're looking for different results, and we as a team come up with the best approach for you and what you're trying to accomplish. So yeah, that's something that we would definitely cover in our first call, and get a better understanding of what you expect. Now, another big or important piece to this puzzle in setting your real estate investment criteria is trying to figure out where you are in your life, right? So like, for example, number one here, is this are you looking to purchase this for income or long-term wealth? Retirement, is this something that's in 25 years, or is this in 2 years? How much experience do you have in real estate, right? Or is this your first property, or are you almost maxed out and you've done this multiple times? Risk is also important, and again, I'll stress this multiple times. Financing, that is such a driver in what our options are. Again, we can go over the wish list of what we want, but qualifying is the ultimate indicator of like what our options are and where we need to focus is based within our financing parameters, and that coincides with number 6, what you can afford. You're going to see here at the bottom of this page, you will see like a colorful chart here, and it goes from Lux, which stands for luxury, all the way to D, which stands for D class, and these are indications of what kinds of property classes. And you'll see as the property class, as you can see, the higher property class tends to come with the most appreciation. And as the property classes gets lower, you will see there's more cash flow. So there's kind of a sliding scale there. And you're going to see all of these designations on any property on our website, right? So it'll be labeled pretty clearly of what type of property. And typically we're gonna go over this in a minute here, but there are expectations or things that you can almost assume based on the property class, right? So this is kind of a quick way to identify maybe what kind of property you're getting yourself into. So to go over property classes a little bit more, a key factor in understanding your property class is your median home price, right? So that we have this information, and it's based on the metropolitan statistical area that we've obtained from the National Association of Realtors. And I'll show you guys where that can be found, but this data is auto-populated on our website. So when we upload a property based in a certain market, we have those median home prices and those stats from the from our resources to make sure that they're accurate. But let's just say for easy numbers, let's look at this first line here where it says SFR. So that stands for single family residence. So you're looking at these property classes, and you'll see these, it goes from luxury to D. So there's no, hard written rule of exactly how property classes are designated, but this is our philosophy and this is how we do it. So we start with the median home price. And like I said, that comes from the National Association of Realtors. We label that median home price right at that 100% mark, right? So let's just say for this example, the median home price is $100,000. So basically what that says is from a property worth $100,000 to $130,000, that would be considered an A-class property. From the purchase price of $130,000 and up, that would be considered luxury. From $100,000 to $80,000B, from $80,000 to $50,000C, and so on, right? So that is how we come up with our property class. It's heavily driven by price. There are other factors that I will go into that help, could maybe swing a property above or below that, straightforward price mark. And then below there's another a slightly altered breakdown, and that's for multifamily. So when you have 2 to 4 units, typically the price point per unit is reduced, right? So then we have adjusted that. We've adjusted those metrics below to reflect accordingly. Okay. So this is a link that we've included in our ebook to help you find the closest MSA or metropolitan statistical area to where you're living. So all of the properties on our website already, like I said, have these auto-populated in the financials, but this is the section within the book. So you can see these little kind of green that look like little homes right on the screen down below. Those are MSAs. So as you zoom in and get closer to your area, you'll find an MSA that you will fall into, and that's where the data is derived from. So here's the breakdown a little bit more. Here's like a cool chart, I guess, that can help break down property classes. So there's certain things that we like to focus on when analyzing properties, and these are things that are not as easy to change. Like, so for example, the breakdown is as follows, and this is, generally speaking, right? There's always kind of exceptions to the rule and outliers, but this is how we are able to help break this down a little bit. So what you can expect from luxury class properties is more executives / business owners. A class, maybe it's professionals or white collar type of employees. B class, middle managers or young adults. C class is typically your hourly employees or more blue collar type of work. And then D class is low income or potentially below the poverty line. So things that we feel matter, right? That's going to be the price point of the property, the cost per square foot, the school district, crime rate. Those are all things that we feel like matter very much. And then things that are not as, important to us, or things that, we're willing to, that matter less, would be the type of house, right? Is it a house, condo, apartment, the age of the property, property size, property condition. And the reason for that is all of those things that I just mentioned can be altered or changed, right? It's not hard to, add square footage to the property or improve the condition or, do things that can change the property. It's much harder to change a school district or to change a neighborhood, right? To change the crime rate in a neighborhood. So those things are definitely much more important. And then down below where it says A, B, and C class, right? You'll see there's kind of a, I like to remember A, B, and C in this way. A class I like to associate with appreciation. C class I like to associate with cash flow. And B class properties I like to associate with both. It's kind of like a hybrid, right? That's how I kind of quickly, when I'm looking at a property, how I can quickly analyze what to expect from it. Now, you'll notice that most of the properties on our website are going to be A to C. We do have some luxury properties, very few, or it's not as common, but you won't see a D class on our property. Now, typically we're more focusing in the A to C for a few reasons. In a lot of situations, some luxury properties, or should I say, in certain situations, luxury properties are at sometimes at a price point where it doesn't make sense. It's so expensive that we cannot warrant enough rent to make the property make sense. Maybe that there's a lot of custom work done to it, or it's just something over the top, big backyard with pools and kind of fun, luxury style amenities that don't make sense to warrant the rent. So therefore it's not a good fit for like a rental. And then on the flip side to that, and those properties are going to have a really tough time cash flowing. They're not going to look very good on paper. On the flip side of that, you have like your D class properties. On paper, those are going to look awesome, right? It's very low purchase price. The rent's probably somewhere in line with what a C class would rent for, and therefore the numbers are going to look fantastic. The issue is there's a human element to the folks that live in D class properties, and what I mean by that is typically it's less stable type of employment, and typically the folks that do live in D class or below properties are not the easiest on the property. So what happens there is you're going to have a lot of variable expenses, and what I mean by variable expenses, those are typically maintenance and vacancy. So maintenance meaning like, things are breaking or people are just a little bit tougher on the property that require more repairs, or vacancy meaning either it's tougher to rent or you're not getting paid the rent. So when you factor in at the end of the year maintenance and vacancy associated with D class properties, oftentimes what you thought you signed up for on this pro forma is nowhere near the realities. So that's why we like to stay away from D class as well. So that's a little bit of a breakdown of the property classes. Here is an example of the two variable expenses I mentioned, which are maintenance and vacancy. So you're going to find a line item on all of our calculations that say variable expenses. And these are expenses we don't have any control over, but we know they're eventually going to happen. So we do make certain estimates. They're not perfect. you can buy a A-class property and you can have 0 maintenance and 0 vacancy for the first year. You can also have 10% maintenance or 10% vacancy. There's no definite insurance on this, except in our experience and what we've been able to gather from selling and managing thousands and thousands of properties, kind of have these classes broken down to certain percentages. So what we like to estimate, and I would say this is probably on the safer side, meaning more conservative, is for A-class properties in the 1 to 4 unit range, we like to assume that there's going to be 8% maintenance and 8% vacancy per year. B-class, 10% maintenance, 10% vacancy, and C-class, 13% and 13%. You'll see down below there's the 5+ unit range, and those percentages have changed a little bit. 10 and 8 for A class, 12 and 10 for B, and 15 and 13 for C. So there's just a little adjustment there. Now, maintenance, right? This is assuming based off of the gross rent. So when we say like maintenance of 8%, this is assuming 8% of the gross rent. Now, vacancy is a little different, right? And I'll show you an example here. So for vacancy, this is an example of an A-class property. So the way we've generated, or I guess you can say budgeted or prepared for vacancy is on an A-class property is if you take 365 days of the year and you times that by 8%, that'll give you 29.2. So that's about 30 days. So about 1 month of the year, we expect it to be vacant. Again, I like to prepare folks for kind of, I guess, a more worst case scenario, and then, essentially under promise and over deliver, right? If you're prepared for 8% and we get it rented out in 2 weeks or 1 week, awesome. Everybody's happy, but I think it's better to be prepared for a 30-day vacancy, which, over the last 12 months has been super uncommon just because of the demand, but that totally can happen, and that's something that we have seen. So these I would say are fairly conservative, but a good threshold to go off of. So yes, you'll see 365 times 8% is about a month of the year. Now, this is our Reddick property rating ebook. This is something that you can find on our website. The website is right here at the bottom of your screen, www.marshallreddick.com/ebook. Also, anytime you're looking at properties on our website, you'll see this kind of on the right side. It'll say, download our free ebook. I highly recommend, taking a look at this. Everything I just spoke about is detailed here in our ebook, and it breaks down the philosophy of how we rate properties and what those ratings translate, how those ratings translate to you as an owner. So if anybody is interested or they're having problems obtaining the book on our website, I'm more than happy to send that to anybody just to get a good read and get an understanding of our philosophy and how we have come up with these figures. Okay, so now I want to talk about where, right? So how we choose markets to invest in. I think we can all agree not every market across the US is a good place to invest in, but we have put together, we have specialized in certain markets, and I'm going to go into those now, but we have put together some key criteria we feel support strong investment markets, and that includes, a strong job market. I think that's so critical, right? We want to make sure that the tenants in this market have the ability to work and pay for rent. So that's so important. It's good, strong jobs. Rental demand, right? We want to make sure we're in a market where there's definitely a high rental demand. Economic diversity. So we don't want to depend on just one sole employer or one type of, industry that supports the entire town, right? We want to have diversity and, other options in case something does collapse, right? Housing affordability. That's something that, I kind of briefly touched on earlier, but it's so important that, for most of us to allow us to get our foot in the door to have, quote unquote, reasonable deals. So, for example, here in Southern California, the price point is significantly higher than a lot of places across the country. So that's turned off a lot of investors here. Not to say all, there's definitely things that make sense here in California, but I would say like the bulk of folks, or especially folks that are just getting started with maybe a tighter budget, having a more reasonable price point is something that's important. Strong education. We want to make sure there's good schools and the ability for families to want to move there and live there long term, right? And then last but definitely not least is reliable property management. Property management is something that I'm going to be discussing later in this presentation, but I can't stress it enough. It is so important to the overall success of your investment. As it's not very difficult to close a 30-day transaction from a real estate side, but holding and maintaining and managing a property for 5, 10, 15 years, that's where the real work is. And that's where I think that's the make or break, in my opinion, of an investment property, is the management. Okay, so here are the markets that Marshall Reddick operates in. So technically we're in 16 markets across the country. What you are going to see here though is we have highlighted certain cities where Marshall Reddick actually has a footprint. And what I mean by that is boots on the ground, brick and mortar location. So that is a place that we have people to help. So whether that be real estate agents, property management teams, our actual offices, these are places that we have those resources. So, the places that you do not see highlighted, those are markets where we do have really great referral resources. Not to say anything's wrong with them. It's just that, it's a different approach, whereas we actually have, more processes and procedures, and it's followed by, our property management and what we've kind of explained to you. Whereas if you maybe go outside of our market, you're just going to be subject to whatever terms and conditions and, processes that other folks are going to go off of. But I would say most of the bulk of the business we're doing are within these green boxes here. So California, of course, is where we are, or where I'm located. Florida is a big market. Texas and Tennessee, those are our top markets, and that's where we're doing the bulk of our business, I'd say. Now, why buy within a major metropolitan? So basically, we like to target major metropolitan areas, and I'll explain why. One is you have a much larger tenant base. When you're in a big, diverse, large city, there's lots of employers, right? So which is super important. Again, there's more selection of property management. Big cities often attract more people, and you have a higher chance for future population growth. That's what we're seeing in a lot of the cities that we've been in. Over the last 12 to 24 months, all of the cities that we've been in for years have expanded exponentially over these last 2 years. And we're seeing that continue on even to today. So it's been really exciting. I mean, I think there's a lot of people moving from maybe the East Coast or from, far West Coast, California, into a lot of other markets that we're in, and we're seeing a ton of growth there. So, when there's already a good infrastructure for a city, it's not hard for people to want to pick up and move. And then larger markets experience greater appreciation. I think it's safe to say across the nation over the last 12 to 24 months, we've seen incredible appreciation. Those markets that are obviously more developed and already have a good base have seen probably more exponential appreciation than some smaller kind of unknown cities. But that's definitely why targeting major metropolitan areas is important to us. Now, within major metropolitans, like for example, I have San Antonio, Texas here, and I also have Austin, Texas here. Those are major metropolitan cities, right? Within those, we like to target the suburbs of those major metropolitans, and I can explain. I'm going to go into detail why, but basically this plot map shows our properties under management in San Antonio and Austin, and right now we have roughly like 1,200 properties under management in just Texas alone. But you'll kind of notice that there are more properties kind of grouped or combined on the outskirts of like the hub of the downtowns, right? You'll see these suburbs are really densely packed here in San Antonio in here in Austin, you'll see like there's more concentration of properties that we manage outside of the downtowns. And my next slide is going to kind of to go over why that is. So why the suburbs of these metropolitans? Well, one, we want the major cities because of all the things I just mentioned. But as many of you know, downtowns, or like the true downtowns of certain cities, they're not always the best. They're in terms of like price points, kind of quality of the area, school, just overall neighborhood. They're older, right? So there's sometimes more crime. So like you'll see all these reasons here. So the suburbs tend to attract more families. They're better school districts. There's typically lower crime. There's newer properties, right? So when you're in a city that's been around for hundreds of years, it starts there, and as people, you can't just keep building on top of each other, so people have to start going further out. So as you go further out, you get into these newer developments that have a larger path to grow. So oftentimes, some of these new communities or like new developments that builders are building, these price points start much less. And if you fast forward 2 years, 3 years, 5 years, you can see how it starts to become densely populated, and prices start to skyrocket. And that's where I think in my opinion, the most wealth is made in real estate, is through appreciation, is through long-term buy and hold. That's a lot of what we practice. That's a lot of what we preach. And I feel like, personally, I've seen, especially over the last couple of years, which is probably a bit of a hyper kind of growth, but I think those folks that may have bought within the last couple of years can really attest to what I'm saying in terms of the appreciation and buying in these markets that have the ability to run. And I think that the suburbs of these major metropolitans have those ingredients. So there are plenty of markets, there are plenty of areas, and there's different reasons why you may buy in each market. So like, for example, like a lot of what, a lot of how we're going to determine what market makes the most sense is honestly by financing, by a price point. Certain folks are going to be limited to a certain price point, and therefore there's only certain properties that, there are certain markets that may fit that bill. So that's going to be a big indicator of like what market to focus on. But let's say that pricing is not a limiting factor for you. Let's say, $1 million cash you have, right? Which typically every property besides maybe some larger multifamilies is going to be under that price point. Let's say that's your option. Well, we have a lot of, one, you can always talk to, somebody like myself to kind of go over what could make the most sense, but also we have a lot of data. We have these data packets that we update annually, and it just basically gives much more detail on the demographics, employment, et cetera, that investors would find valuable. And we have these free on our website for you to review. We also have webinars specifically on these markets. We also have the ability to call up agents in these markets and ask specific questions about neighborhoods or areas. Maybe you heard something from a coworker or a friend, or read something online about a certain city within these markets, and you want to talk to somebody boots on the ground. I can't tell you how invaluable it is to leverage our resources, and one of the most important resources we have is our people, right? Our agents, boots on the ground people that can tell us things that are happening live and that they see changing and happening, that would give you, I guess, a leg up, especially as someone who's probably not familiar with the area or who may not even go to the area. I can't tell you how many clients don't actually go to the market, and that's totally okay. Most of them don't. They do, after getting comfortable with our team and our, our agents there, they feel that comfort and are able to make the transition or make the purchase without relying on a trip for themselves. So, yep, these are our data packets. And again, here's our website where you can find more of those or all of them here. And if you do have questions trying to get to any of them, I can also send those to you as well. Okay, so next we are going to talk about which method of purchasing is right for you. So you'll see a few bullet points here, right? And starting with conventional financing, which is above and beyond the most common method of acquiring property, but you also have HELOCs or home equity lines of credit or cash out refinances. So if you already own a property, you can leverage that equity. That's another way of obtaining the cash to move forward. There's also our in-house private financing, which I discussed earlier in the call. It's typically for folks that are, like I said, doing fix and flips or self-directed accounts. But let's say for whatever reason you don't qualify conventionally and you need maybe like a short-term type of financing for conventional, or maybe you just don't want to deal with conventional financing and you're okay paying a higher premium. Private financing is an awesome option. Again, there's the self-directed retirement accounts. There's always cash, right? Which some investors prefer to buy cash, and then 1031 exchanges. So for those of you that are unfamiliar with 1031 exchanges, that is when you already own a property and you decide to sell that property. And instead of taking the proceeds from that sale and paying capital gains tax, you can defer that capital gains tax, and you can use those proceeds to buy a new property. Usually you are buying something more expensive, bigger, better, and that's how investors are able to leverage and to continue to grow their portfolio and buy more and more and more, is because you don't have to pay capital gains tax with a 1031 exchange. You're able to roll that in to continue to buy. So that's a huge resource, and we have great referrals for 1031 exchange accommodators. And to make sure that that's done correctly, it could be a little bit of a daunting process if you're new to it. So knowing all the rules and regulations is so important in that specific world, and we have a great team that can help with that. Now, as we move along, how do you mathematically measure the success of each investment? So there's basically, it's all about the numbers, right? And does this investment meet, your financial goals? So basically the two main metrics that we deal with are, cash flow or appreciation. So cash flow is measured by a cash on cash return, and appreciation is typically measured by a return on investment. And we have a really robust financial calculator on our website that helps break down other metrics and other things that are important to investors. But I would say, just generally speaking, these are two really important measurements that we use. So for those of you that are not familiar with our website, but any property you click on, you're going to see this financial calculator on our website. It's really awesome. It breaks down and it's editable, which is great. So you can cover basically it covers basically any investment benchmark that you would need to properly analyze the property. Again, most of the fields are editable, and what's nice is there's a function symbol. I don't know if you guys can see it here on the right side, but on the right side of the screen here, there's a little function symbol, and that gives you the formula of how we've arrived at this number. It tells you how we come up with these calculations, so that if you're trying to kind of reverse engineer and get a better understanding, that will give you that clarity. And one thing that I like to mention here, there are some default assumptions that we've made in some of these calculators. One is down payment, another is interest rate, right? So interest rates are adjusted periodically by our preferred lender, who keeps a really good pulse on the rates. And we do have a lender that does tend to get better pricing than what you may be seeing or hearing from other folks. So that's kind of a sole and separate conversation, but those two items are typically assumed or defaulted. Now, the thing about down payments, though, that I want to make clear is on our website, for any single family property, you're going to see the default down payment as 25% for a single family property. Okay, for a multifamily, that means 2 and 2+ units, you're going to see a default figure of 30%. Truthfully, those numbers can be reduced if you may be really tight on assets. So for a single family, technically the lowest down payment you can put down is 20%, and for a multifamily, it's actually 25% versus 25 and 30. Now, there are much better interest rates associated with those higher down payments. You typically have a lower loan amount, therefore it gives this property a better chance of cash flowing. So with purchase prices and with interest rates being where they are today, any bit you can help, which is putting more money down, is definitely helpful in improving those figures and making the numbers work a bit better. What I'm going to show you guys a couple properties here this evening, and just to kind of quickly go over so that you have the ability to look at an example of what you're going to see on our website. But before I do that, I just like to show kind of the 25-year appreciation trend on one of our top markets, which is San Antonio, Texas. And this information was again taken from the National Association of Realtors. So you're going to see here a little a little kind of chart on the upper left corner, which kind of just shows the appreciation trends from 1997 until last year, and kind of that very steady appreciation. And the average is about 4.7%. But you'll see on the right side, we've kind of broken it down year over year, and even through what I always like to point out specifically in Texas is basically, there hasn't been any double-digit appreciation increases or decreases, except last year in 2021, which was about a 14.5% increase. But I point that out because, folks that say, hey, the prices are getting really expensive, I think I'm going to wait for, maybe a market correction or a market crash. I just want to point out in 2008, 9, and 10, which are arguably the most devastating real estate collapse of I guess our time. Even within those years, the market in San Antonio specifically had a very little movement, right? It shows that the prices did not budge what you saw here in California or Arizona or Florida or some of these other markets. So I like to point that out because San Antonio tends to be a very steady, stable market, and that's a really common reason why folks are buying there, investing there, and moving there. I also wanted to point out just the bottom left corner. I used that kind of general example earlier of the property classes. Well, this is actually what you'll see, the accurate numbers. So like the median home price in 2021 for San Antonio was $291,200. So anything from 291 to 378 was A class. Above 378 was luxury. 291 to 232 B class, and you'll see those breakdowns. So I just wanted you guys to take a look to see how that changes when you actually have real figures in there. So and then the same as below, the multifamily breakdown as well. So this is a new construction duplex in San Antonio. So these are really, really interesting because these are actually off-market opportunities. These are, exclusive to Marshall Reddick clients. We have a relationship with a builder where we are, doing all of the sales, and typically we've been able to, secure these mainly for our investors, our personal investors within Marshall Reddick. So what's nice about that is we've eliminated, these bidding wars that we're seeing a lot of recently. The only kind of limiting factor is the builders, release a certain amount in phases, and it's basically being able to obtain these while they are available. We currently have a few available now in different cities, and in some of these cities are, the price points vary. So New Braunfels is a kind of a premier city in between San Antonio and Austin, and this is probably our highest price point for multifamily or these new constructions, but this is a good breakdown. Again, you'll see the kind of the specs here. It's an A-class property built in 2022, 2744 square foot, and little description here. It's, basically comes with, laminate flooring and or luxury laminate flooring, stainless steel appliances, basically move-in ready. These have been an awesome, product for a lot of our investors, for those that are doing 1031 exchanges, right? And they, as long as the timing works, this has been a super great option for a lot of folks. I have a family member who purchased one of these, and it's just been great. So just to kind of show you quickly the breakdown here on the right, you'll see the list price is $545. Again, we assume that down payment as 30%. Initial repair cost 0 since it's brand new. And then, we have an estimated closing cost. Again, that's something that can change and depends if you're paying points or no points, or kind of how those closing costs break down. But that would be, if you added all that up, that would be the investment capital needed to acquire a property at this price point, assuming that down payment. And then here are some of the factors with the property. So we have our gross rent, $3,700 total. So that is for both units. We have, assuming the mortgage payment of 5.625, so 2196 there. We have our taxes, our insurance. We assume our management fee, so 7% of the gross monthly rent. There is a small HOA, and then utilities and landscaping are covered by the tenant. So with that said, you'll see all your expenses, and then if you back that 3,700 out over the fixed expenses, you'll get a monthly income of 366. Now, this is what you're going to typically see every month. I have a handful of investment properties, and typically what I see is, the gross rent minus all the fixed expenses. That is what I'm typically seeing. Now, of course, there is maintenance and vacancy, and it's just hard to say exactly when you're going to have them. So what we do is we back out, maintenance and vacancy, and those are going to be the variable expenses you see below. So you'll see I've actually changed the maintenance in this scenario to 5%. On a new construction for the first, handful of years, you're going to have most likely 0, and a lot of it is covered by a builder warranty. So I think even 5% is probably conservative, but we can definitely back that off of 8%. So you have the 185 there, and then estimated vacancy, even though these are renting very quickly, we'll still, just to be safe. And then you have a leasing fee. So that's actually part of our management, and I can kind of explain that a little bit later, but we've averaged every 18 months, assuming you have to pay a leasing fee. That's kind of, a year and a half on average, maybe, where you're gonna have to place a new tenant and pay that fee. So with all of those variable expenses factored in, it would actually show that the property loses about $217 a month. Now, again, that is assuming that these variables are accurate at this price point and that they happen, month after month. I would say typically that's, like I said, conservative, but it's better to, like I said, under promise and over deliver. So what I do want to focus on is that, our calculators also assume a return on investment, and you can change the amount of years held. So as you hold the property for less time, the return is lower. As you hold the property for a longer period of time, the returns grow. So all of our properties are defaulted to a 15-year hold. One thing that we do not factor in these 15 years, which is, not accurate, is we do not factor in rental increases. I would say that we almost increase rents almost every year. At least every 2 years. So to not factor in rental increases is definitely over conservative. And for those reasons, that these numbers we're gonna, like I said, that we like to err on the side of caution. But even assuming you did not raise the rent for 15 years, you can basically, we have two metrics here: your projected profit or return on investment. Now, profit, it's that's broken down on our website, and you can see how that's generated. But basically, profit is going to be your cash flow, appreciation, a principal pay down, and your selling expenses. So that's how we would be able to come up with this number of 15 years of appreciation, and even factoring in the negative cash flow. The appreciation is the large contributing factor here. And with that, you know, our profit divided by, you know, what we've invested in the property would give you this, you know, return. So all of these metrics are definitely broken down into more detail, but I did want to highlight, you know, that 16.5% as something that's really interesting, as well as, you know, that 434 number there. So those are all something that's, you know, something that I think stands out, especially in, you know, times like this. But one thing, like I said, it's not hard when you have 2 units for this estimated monthly cash flow that's showing a slight negative to change. My first, you know, a property I own in Texas, it's a duplex, and the first year I bought it, yes, it did not cash flow, but very quickly rents were changed, and that number has significantly changed over the last, you know, 12 months. So it's not difficult for these things to change, especially as you have more doors. Small increments can make a pretty big impact. I am now going to just quickly cover the Tennessee market, Clarksville, Tennessee, which is another awesome market for us. This is also another very steady and consistent market that has performed well for investors, especially over the last 5 years. You're going to see a similar kind of trend line in the top left corner. On the right, you know, there's appreciation trends. You'll see there's, you know, again, no double-digit increases or decreases even through the 2008 and 9 era. Except last year in 2021, there was a big jump there. We saw a lot of movement and a lot of folks buying in Clarksville. So the folks that bought before 2021 probably are, you know, seeing that themselves. Again, you know, here's actually a luxury class property. So again, not as common to get into the luxury market, but this is an example of luxury in, you know, Clarksville. You know, I wish the luxury price point was $364 here in Southern California. It is not. But yeah, you'll see here the price point, you know, luxury class built in 2010, 2,700 square feet, 5 bed, 3 bath. And yeah, you'll see the price point there at $364.9. We're assuming a 30% down payment here. Again, this is actually, you know what, this should be 25%. It really could be 20, but this does show a 30%, probably because of the price point, and it helps with getting a little bit better figures here and with that interest rate. So again, you'll see the closing cost estimate there, gross rent at $2,200 minus the mortgage, the taxes, the insurance, management fee, 8%, HOA, and, you know, utilities and landscape, again, typically covered by the tenant. When you back all those expenses out, you're just over $300. And then when you back out the variable expenses and the leasing fee, you have a slight negative of $94 a month. Now, again, with, you know, a year or so, that number could be changed into a positive. So something to not get hung up on, and I just want to address it. So again, you'll see these projected profit here after 15 years and the projected ROI after 15 years as well. Again, these numbers can be adjusted, altered, and feel free. We can look at these together and kind of play with the figures to make these adjustments however, you know, you see fit. You know, if you disagree with a rate or with a rent or with maintenance or vacancy, you can make those adjustments. So, you know, whether you're going to buy this property or not, I think it's fun to kind of go through the calculators and make those adjustments to get more familiar, and also to set proper expectations moving forward. One thing I do want to point out is our website is not the only place that we get properties from. So most of the properties that our clients are actually buying or, you know, buying, like closing on, are from the MLS. The market's moving really quick. So using our website, you know, everything is manually uploaded. So I would say it's not the premier spot for the most accurate, up-to-date statuses, but it's still it's live data that, you know, maybe the status is changed from sold or from active, it should be changed to escrow or sold, but it's still, you know, we're updating these every day, and you're still able to get good examples. But truthfully, like when you are shopping for a property, most of the time it's either going to be from the MLS or maybe an off-market opportunity, and we'll upload the property to the website for your review so you can see it in this format. But the website is not going to be the place that you're probably going to shop, generally speaking, at least in my experience for the last 12 months. Okay, so I would like to quickly cover property management. So like I said in the beginning, this is the make or break element of investment property. So we basically have two fees that we charge. So one is the monthly management fee, which ranges between 7 to 8% depending on the type of property, and you'll see the breakdowns here below. And then we also have a leasing fee, which is 50% of the first month's rent. So that leasing fee is only paid when we have to procure a tenant. So when we have to fill a spot, it's vacant, and it goes to our leasing agent for their time and efforts, as well as background checks and everything associated with placing that tenant. It's not difficult to just place somebody in the property right away. I can't tell you how the most anxious our owners and our folks is from the moment they have closed and basically the terms start when it's theirs. From the day before the tenant gets placed is the most anxious that I deal with owners, right? And rightfully so. It's a time where you own and you're technically you're not having income on the property. So it's not difficult for us to place tenants, but it is more time consuming to place good tenants, right? We don't want to rush just to get a warm body in the house, because I can't tell you enough how much trouble that can be by placing someone who's not of quality in right away, and then having to deal with whatever it is, maybe their late payments, non-payments, difficult on the property. Those kind of things will impact you much, much worse than waiting an extra 2 weeks to find a great family or just a great solid tenant that ultimately will stay for many years and have a great experience and take care of the home like their own. So that is so important, is having that patience and just understanding of the process, and knowing that what we really want to do is get good tenants, not just any tenant. So yeah, this is a quick breakdown. Florida, Tennessee, San Antonio. Pretty simple breakdown of our property management. I wouldn't say property management is a huge profit center for us. It's honestly a way where we're able to keep in touch, make sure that things are going well with the property, so that we have the opportunity to help grow your portfolio, so we can get a second opportunity to help you buy. Truth be told, buying one investment property is not going to make you rich. It's not going to allow you to retire and kick your feet up and quit work. The idea is, though, that we can help you build a portfolio, get multiple doors, and that could make a significant impact. That could actually change your working, obligations and how it currently sits. But we would never get the opportunity to help you with a second, third, or fourth acquisition if the first one's not going well. And truthfully, the 30-day escrow is, can be done relatively simple and smooth, but management is going to be the differentiator to determine if you're willing to work with us again. And that's why we try to make management fees as simple as possible, and we try to perform at a highest level so that we get those opportunities to do repeat business and earn a second attempt with the folks that are trying to grow a portfolio. Oftentimes the question is, what does property management do? Here's some quick checks of what is done. The things that aren't here that I think are really important, though, is just knowing the local rental laws, right? Rental laws vary from city to city and state to state. Like in California, very tenant friendly. You really got to make sure you know what you're doing here, because if you do place a bad tenant, getting them out is extremely difficult. So knowing your laws and what you can do and processes and procedures are really important. Again, proper disclosures. And ultimately the key is to keep you out of court. We want to make sure that there's never a situation where, this investment is causing you, losing you money, or creating a situation where it's taking you away from work because of, unruly tenants, or situations that maybe a newer landlord or someone who's not as seasoned got you into, hot water. Another thing I like to point out regarding our property management is we only make money when you make money. So we don't have a management we don't charge a management fee when the property is vacant, or if we didn't collect rent that month for whatever reason, if they didn't pay. So we're only taking a percentage of what we collect. I have seen, and another thing, we don't have an in-house maintenance division. We only use outside vendors for all of our work, and then we have top of the line property software for tracking and detailing leases and financials. And I can tell you how important the two items I just mentioned, which is only charging a fee when we collect money and not doing in-house maintenance. I actually own property outside of a market where we manage, and I'm forced to deal with property managers that do things different. And in my experience with here and seeing how we do it and how they do it out there is starkly different. And it's definitely troubling, because when you have a company that is charging you a management fee regardless of money, if rent is collected or not, what's the incentive to place a tenant? Why would I even want that headache to put somebody in the house when I can make the same amount of money by having it vacant? So there's very little incentive there, which is pretty annoying. Also, in-house maintenance, that might sound like, to some, that may sound like, wow, that's a huge advantage. You have people in-house that can do the work. The problem with that is, if it's a profit center, if damages to the property or maintenance requests are a profit center, what I've noticed is there tends to be a lot more things that are breaking all the time, and the charges seem to be a little bit out of whack, because it's a profit center for them. They're able to make money off that. We don't do that. We have third-party vendors. We send them a lot of business, so we get usually very, very good pricing. And if you have an issue with one of those invoices, we'll get another quote. There is no benefit for us. There is no coordinating fee. There is no profit sharing that we share with these vendors. It doesn't matter who you use. We have good resources and good referrals. If you find somebody better, great. So I think that's so critical in kind of establishing a long-term relationship. So for those of you that are worried, or there's definitely risk involved, right? Any investment does have risk. Some of the typical kind of issues are vacancy, maintenance, property values maybe changing, and natural disasters. So the best way to reduce risk is by buying in good areas. We spoke about different property classes, and that's a key factor in my opinion. Buying in a major market that offers good employment, right? That's really important. Home inspections, right? This is a great negotiation tool as well. And this info is passed on to our property management team to know, but you want to make sure we know what we're buying. It's hard to just see with the naked eye what's going on, but most of the due diligence is actually done in escrow. We're not going to be able to figure out all of the things that may be wrong with the house just before we place an offer. And I know that's a weird feeling for the folks that are new, but the due diligence is typically done when in escrow. And then, you'll see here natural disasters. So, good insurance with, roughly 500K liability. That's the best way to reduce your exposure. And obviously good property management is going to help make sure that we're preparing for, things that might be typical in an area, whether it's like, heavy rains or winds or, any kind of weather patterns. So yeah, that is, those are all things that could be a risk, and these are how we, may eliminate some of those risks. So as we go to a close here, I just wanted to kind of reiterate, Marshall Reddick is a one-stop shop, so we're able to kind of handle everything all in one spot here. So that the conversations start with somebody like myself as an advisor. I'm able to learn from you and see what you're looking for. I usually introduce you quickly to one of our preferred lenders who helps determine financing, and that gives us a really good indication of what market, what kind of property. We relay that information to our realtor. Our realtor helps secure a property. Then from there, we would go ahead and, once escrow is open, be able to do our due diligence and get inspectors and insurance agents. And then, at close, we'll be able to loop in our property management. And you'll see, as someone who may be buying outside of the state you're currently living in, having these resources and this coinciding team is really helpful, right? It allows, you don't have to be on the phone and figure out all these different people and how to mesh them together. We do this for a living. We do this every day, thousands and thousands of properties, and we have awesome teams. And it's a well-oiled machine at this point. Marshall Reddick's been around since the 70s, and we've done some really great improving from over the last 10 years. And I think that there's so many folks that I talk to who went to Marshall seminar years and years ago, and things are definitely different now with all of the, I guess, one-stop element where our people are doing most of these roles, right? We don't do some of them, right? We're not inspectors or appraisers or insurance folks, but we do have good people that we found in those professions. And I encourage you to rely on those. And if any of these are, specifically are like folks that you have a really good insurance guy, that's awesome. We're okay to let those, work with those people, but we do have great resources for you guys. A big part of our business is education. So just like tonight's webinar, we do a ton of videos, presentations, live events. Those have kind of tapered off over the last year, but we're definitely kicking those back up. So if you're ever interested in attending more events or learning more from us, all of our education is free. It's www.marshallreddick.com/learn. There's awesome articles and presentations and webinars and all kinds of things, and then different topics too, right? We cover, this is our general how to buy investment. It's kind of one of our main staples of education, but we also have market specific, like targeting certain cities and markets that we operate in. There's also like, tax information where we link up with, one of our tax professionals. We have 1031 exchange seminars where we link up with our 1031 exchange accommodators. Different types of presentations that we bring value. Our goal is to bring value to you so that you can entrust us in actually being able to service you in the, in the services that we can, that we can work with you with, right? So whether that be the brokerage, the property management, private lending, whatever it is, we want to, help educate you so we can have the opportunity to work with you on those fronts. So this is my contact information. This is me, Vince Tomich, again, advisor here. I will be doing some follow-ups after this presentation, most likely tomorrow. So these calls can be as long as short as you want. I'm here to help however I can. If any of you would like to reach out to me directly, feel free. This is my contact information below. And again, I want to thank you guys so much for spending the time with me this evening. It's always great to connect and really appreciate it. So thank you guys so much, and I hope everybody has a great night. Thank you.